Mundeshwari Prasad Sinha was one of the best known political leaders of Dhanbad. He used to head the local unit of the Indian National Trade Union Congress, or INTUC, that is affiliated to the ruling Congress party. A sophisticated labor leader, he acquired considerable prominence in the post-nationalization period. His second wife, Dorothy, used to work with the British Army and wrote poems in English. She compiled a collection of poetry entitled Facets that was published by Writers' Workshop, Kolkata in 1976. The first poem in the collection bore the title The Woman Worker and read, "Her rough feet with rustic grace walked the street while on her face was the fatigue of heat and dust, and in her arms the symbol of lust, its tiny fist feet on her breast, and gave one teat no moment's rest. Yet on her head, like a crown, she carried a load. I slowed down to let her pass, but lest I be seen, did not bow, alas, to that poor queen."
He was at one time associate of KB Sahai, who was the chief minister of Bihar, and who in fact tried to implement land reforms to an extent, which he didn't succeed entirely, but he did try. Now, BP Sinha was part of this kind of a relatively progressive sort of congressman in Bihar. But over time, what happened is that he carved out his niche and empire in the coal fields, and he set himself up as a huge sort of political leader in this part of the world. And his style was very much part of a kind of a aristocratic style. His house, his home, was called the White House. And he had this palatial and well-guarded and mansion.
वो तो सही माने में ट्रेड यूनियन लीडर थे, और उन्होंने तो कोल माइंस ऑनर के भी उतनी जो है परवाह की जितनी मज़दूरों की परवाह की। आज तक उनके घर से कोई भी खाली नहीं लौटा, चाहे मज़दूर हों, चाहे कोल कंपनी के उस समय निजी मालिक हों। और नेशनलाइजेशन के बाद भी उन्होंने जो ट्रेड यूनियन की जो प्रथा चलाई यहाँ पे, उस प्रथा को जो है आज तक ये बाकी के जो ट्रेड यूनियनिस्ट हैं वो उसको व्यवसाय बना लिए, और उन्होंने बिना स्वार्थ के मज़दूरों का भी भला किया, और एक जागृति उन्होंने मज़दूरों में पैदा की, जो जागृति अभी के नेता नहीं पैदा कर पाते हैं।
But I do remember the mystic surrounding the White House, the bungalow in which he lived. And everybody, said that he was like an aristocrat, and he would not do any dirty things himself, but he just needed to make a phone call and get people bumped off. It was that simple for him.
देखिए, सिन्हा जी ने यूनियन की राजनीति में जिस परंपरा का बीज बोया, वही परंपरा आज यहाँ के मजदूरों की बर्बादी का कारण है, बेबाकी से अगर बातों को रखी जाए तो। और यहाँ मज़दूरों की स्थिति में तब्दीली आए, उनकी स्थिति बदले, इसकी जो राजनीति शुरू हुई उसे लाल झंडे वालों ने शुरू की, AK राय ने शुरू की। लेकिन अभी जो स्थिति है, अभी BP सिन्हा को आदर्श मानने वाले लीडरों की चल रही है, और मज़दूरों की स्थिति में सुधार आए, ऐसी सोच रख के राजनीति करने वाले लोगों की कमी हो गई है।
तो आप समझते हैं BP सिन्हा धनबाद का पहला माफिया बॉस थे?
लोग तो यही कहते हैं।
अभी सहमत?
हाँ, बिल्कुल सहमत। जितना सुना हूँ उनके बारे में, लगता तो यही है। लेकिन ये भी है कि यहाँ माफियाओं का स्टार क्रेज है। आज यहाँ पे हेमा मालिनी आ जाए, आज यहाँ श्रीदेवी आ जाए, आज यहाँ करीना कपूर आ जाए, और आज यहाँ सूरज सिंह आ जाए, तो ये 3-4 जो स्टार हैं, जितनी भीड़ जुटाने की कुव्वत रखते हैं, उतनी कुव्वत यहाँ का एक माफिया जुटाने की रखता है। तो यहाँ माफियाओं का क्रेज़ है, स्टार क्रेज़ है। यहाँ माफियाओं का स्टार क्रेज़ है। यहाँ के जो लड़के हैं, आम तौर पे जिन भी घरों के हों, वो बड़े होकर एक बड़ा माफिया बनना चाहते हैं। वो धनबाद की मानसिकता में रची बसी है ये चीज़ें।
Was a very sensible, I would say, moderate political leader. He was not of the fire and brimstone type, and he exerted a certain amount of level of decency, which normally trade union leaders don't exhibit.
It was a balmy evening in September 1978. BP Sinha was drinking his evening peg of Scotch whisky. His granddaughter was playing in front of him. 4 men walked into the White House and pumped a volley of bullets into him.
माफिया लफ्ज़ तो बहुत व्यापक शब्द है। ये तो बड़े शब्द को छोटे लोगों के लिए इस्तेमाल किया गया है। माफिया तो वो लोग होते हैं जो पैरेलल गवर्नमेंट चलाते हैं गवर्नमेंट के खिलाफ। ये लोग कुछ मसल पावर वाले लोग हैं। पावर तो हमेशा प्रिविलेज रहा है, आज से नहीं, महाभारत के टाइम से रहा। पावर की तो हमेशा चलती रही है।
When I met Suraj Dev Singh for the first time in May 1987, he told me he had been jailed because his political opponents had falsely implicated him because they were envious of his popularity among workers. Among the lawyers who argued for him in court was Ashok Sen, former Law Minister of India. Singh added that he had broken away from his former mentor because BP Sinha had betrayed the interests of workers. I asked him how many trucks and dumpers he owned. Why should I tell you? He shot back. That the income tax department may go after him if such information was made public. He was supremely confident. He considered his guru to be Chandrasekhar, who went on to become Prime Minister of India.
My most striking memory is that the amount of power these people wielded. Despite the fact that these bureaucrats, concerned bureaucrats, really wanted to do something, they were pretty helpless because they had all political protection. Both within Bihar and also from Delhi. At that time there was the Janata Party in power. And Chandrasekhar, who was otherwise a great icon to me, he was a great icon to me and I was quite close to him actually. But I found a darker side to Chandrasekhar. I found that his favorite was Surya Dev Singh, who was one of the biggest Balwans there. And Surya Dev Singh could not do any wrong for Chandrasekhar. So, it was amazing to see how even radical leaders like Chandrasekhar, who presented a completely different face in Delhi, had these, weaknesses, for, local hoods. So I asked Chandrasekhar ji, I was really surprised to hear that this Balwan Surya Dev Singh was an absolute mafia don. He has your blessings? That's not possible, Chandrasekhar ji. Chandrasekhar ji, हमने तुम्हारा story पढ़ा, but बिल्कुल गलत है. He seemed very angry. I said, Chandrasekhar ji, how are you saying? He said, no, you are normally a sensible fellow. You must investigate properly. No, there is another side. A lot of people want to defame him. He's a nice man. He does a lot of things for the poor. So I realized that I was really surprised. I asked many people who were close to Chandrasekhar, and they said, please don't talk to Surya Dev Singh. We've tried to tell him also. But there he has absolutely, a blind spot.
I did not meet Suraj Dev Singh at all, but Suraj Dev Singh was one trade union leader which was the focus of my attention in many cases, because he and his men were involved in a large number of cases of violence as well as in money lending activities. And I was the first deputy commissioner who took courage to put Suraj Dev Singh under MESA. It was a different matter that after I passed this order, state government did not approve this order as it was required under the law. So therefore he was released after some time. But when I did that, the entire Dhanbad town was stunned because they could not imagine that this could ever have happened. Such was the terror of Suraj Dev Singh.
See, Mr. Suraj Dev Singh was also a slightly different type of leader. People identified him as a mafia. But more importantly than being a mafia, he was a benign leader. And there are many good things that he did to Dhanbad and its neighborhood. Maybe the excess amount of money available to his family, his close connection with our former Prime Minister, I will not name him. His brother.
May not name Chandrasekhar, but everybody knows him.
But his brothers and his skins exploited in his name. Otherwise, Suraj Dev Singh, as an individual, I was talking about the checks and balances in law and order situation. He really maintained a balance between the Muslim community of Dhanbad and neighborhood and their antisocial elements very well. And Suraj Dev Babu did quite a few good things for Dhanbad. That's my impression of him.
Suraj Dev Singh, I did meet when he was a legislator in Bihar. And Suraj Dev Singh was a large man, but he was not an uncouth man. Contrary to the impression that he was a muscle man and so on and so forth, he was surprisingly soft-spoken, he was surprisingly civil, and he had a lot of political savvy. He understood, politics. And he explained away, his rise and fall in terms of his survival. He said that whatever he had to do for survival. If he hadn't done it, he would have been bumped off long back. So he blamed it on rivals and so on and so forth. But as long as he was alive, I think he wielded an enormous power. Both over the community as well as over politicians. His proximity to politicians like Chandrasekhar and others, was well known. And he believed, I think he believed that he could do anything with money. He could buy anyone with money. And he did that.
He was also a very suave talker and a very pleasant person and very polished and all that. But I don't think there is any doubt about the fact that he governed with force, as opposed to BP Sinha governing with a certain amount of love and care and stuff like that. Even while he was making money, I have no doubt that he made a lot of money. But I think there was one step down was when his followers took over, and I think since then there has been it's sort of degenerated into utter chaos.
He met with me only once, and I found him quite nice to me when he met me, like any other person. Beyond that, I don't think I have any animosity against him, except that out of so many persons who were accused in case, he was one of them. And he happened to be important because he was an MLA. So for others, he may be quite important, but as far as I was concerned and the rule of law was concerned, he was like any other accused. So I can't say beyond that.
You pursued cases against him, criminal cases?
He was one of the persons against whom we pursued the cases, yes.
आपका पिताजी जब यहाँ पे थे, जब वो विधायक थे, अब तो 15 साल हो गए हैं, वो गुजर गए हैं जी, उनके बारे में भी ऐसे आरोप लगाया गया था। उनको ऐसे हमारे पास अखबार है, मैगजीन है जिसमें उनका तस्वीर छपा और लिखा है माफिया डॉन ऑफ धनबाद। क्यों ऐसे इनके बारे में ऐसे आरोप लगाया गया था?
मेरे पिताजी बहुत मेहनत करके और बहुत परिश्रम करके उन्होंने एक मुकाम हासिल किया था। जिसका परिचय आप धनबाद में आए होंगे तो किसी भी आम आदमी से बात करके आपको मिला हो। मेरे पिता ने हमेशा अन्याय के खिलाफ, लोगों के प्रति हो रहे अपराध के खिलाफ आवाज़ उठाई है। उस समय के कुछ दबंग लोग जो अपने आप को माफिया कहते थे और अपने आप को यहाँ का सर्वे सर्वा मानते थे, उनका विरोध करने की हिम्मत हमारे पिताजी ने की थी। मजदूरों का हक दिलाने की लड़ाई हमारे पिता ने लड़ी थी। मजबूरों पर, मजलूमों पर जुल्म ढाने वालों को रोकने का काम हमारे पिताजी ने किया था। इसी कारणवश उनके ऊपर इस तरीके का जो इल्ज़ाम है वो लगा। लेकिन मैं मानता हूं कि कहीं से इस इल्ज़ाम का, इस आरोप का कहीं से कोई आधार नहीं है। यह बिल्कुल और बिल्कुल निराधार है। क्योंकि मैं आपसे कहता हूं कि किसी व्यक्ति के 15 साल गुजरने के 15 साल बाद एक पिता जब मर जाता है तो 1 साल या बहुत ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा तो 2 साल उसका पुत्र उसे याद रखता है। लेकिन आप धनबाद में घूम करके देखिए कि विधायक जी के घर में बहुत ऐसे घर आपको मिलेंगे जहाँ पर भगवान के बगल में विधायक जी की तस्वीर है, हमारे पापा की तस्वीर है। लोग उन्हें देवता समान मानते थे। तो आरोप प्रत्यारोप तो लगते हैं, जो काम करते हैं उन्हीं पे आरोप लगते हैं।
उनके नाम में ऐसे उनके खिलाफ केस भी लगा था। लोग कहते थे बीपी सिन्हा जी के खून के पीछे उनके आदमी थे। बहुत सारे आरोप लोग उस समय तो लगाते थे। मगर आपसे मैं जो पूछना चाहता हूँ कि उन्होंने तो चंद्रशेखर जी का बहुत ही नज़दीक थे। क्यों ऐसे लोग आपका पिताजी के खिलाफ लड़ते? सिर्फ क्या कि वो आम आदमी के लिए कुछ करने चाहते थे, इसीलिए उनके खिलाफ लोग पसंद नहीं किया? वो चाहता नहीं कि वो कुछ करे?
आप मेरे से ये बताएं कि क्या किसी मजदूर को उसका हक दिलाना अपराध है? क्या किसी मजबूर को उसका हक दिलाना अपराध है? आज श्रमिक राजनीति के नाम पर या आम राजनीति के नाम पर यहाँ दुकान चलती है। अगर कोई मजदूर किसी श्रमिक नेता के पास जाता है या कोई आम आदमी किसी नेता के पास जाता है और उससे काम करने की या उससे कोई भी काम करवाने की गुहार लगाता है, तो वो काम नहीं, वो डील करते हैं, वो बिजनेस डील करते हैं। अगर मेरे पिता ने ऐसा काम किया होता तो आज 15 साल बाद भी, उनके गुजरने के 15 साल बाद भी उनका नाम लोग इस तरह से नहीं लेते, उनको लोग देवता की तरह नहीं मानते।
Decent house, even by the standards of metropolitan areas in India. By Dhanbad standards, this is positively palatial. This is the house, Singh Mansion, where Suraj Deo Singh used to live till he died on the 15th of June 1991 when he was 51 years old.
Even these dark years, Dhanbad has had the good fortune of having some of the finest officers in both administration as well as the police, And I think, the doggedness with which, this lot, carried on the investigation. They have lodged cases against the mafia, they have investigated their income tax returns, some of the CBI officers, have pursued, these cases and so on. Unfortunately, I believe that they haven't received the kind of support they should have from the government and the political class.
Day of my transfer, I never realized that reaction will be so wild among the people. As I recall, I was not in Dhanbad when the news of transfer came. I was camping in Bokaro, and when I returned, I found a situation whereby people were on roads, they were raising slogans. I was surprised. I can't forget that day. I don't know why it happened.
Is it because people were unhappy that you had been transferred?
Apparently so, otherwise they would not agitate. They were not celebrating, they were protesting against the government of that time.
Before you were transferred as Deputy Commissioner Dhanbad on the 24th of July 1975, during the emergency, I understand that these mafia gangsters who you had antagonized, they learnt that you had been transferred even before you got the official order that you had been transferred. And they were overjoyed and they were euphoric, and in a drunken condition, they tore up bundles of currency notes and scattered them in front of the official residence of the Deputy Commissioner of Dhanbad. Tell me what happened that night. Give me your recollections of what happened that night, the night of the 24th of July 1975.
Well, it is true that all those people who were affected by my activities would indeed be very happy at my transfer, and there is no doubt that my transfer was effected on account of various pressures existed on the state government, including pressures coming from Government of India, because many of the colliery union officials against whom I had taken action, criminal as well as violation of labor laws, belong to the ruling party's union called INTAC. So therefore pressures were also coming from Government of India, and there were also local pressures as well. But what really amazed me was that, and the incident is entirely true, that I found next day in the morning 100 rupee currency notes being torn and near the gate. So I immediately called the superintendent of police, and then we got this information registered just as a part of investigation. And but it is true that this happened.
Not all trade union leaders in Dhanbad were like BP Sinha or Suraj Dev Singh. Arun Kumar Roy came to work in the Sindri fertilizer plant 40 years ago as a young engineer. He and president of the Bihar Colliery Kamgar Union. He has served thrice as a member of the Legislative Assembly of Bihar, and he was elected Member of Parliament on 3 occasions. A founding member of the Marxist Coordination Committee, A.K. Roy was the only MP in the Lok Sabha or the lower house of Parliament with 543 MPs who opposed a bill to increase the salary and perquisites of all members of Parliament. When you look back on your life, you are 70 years old. What would you like to be remembered most as? What would you like to leave behind for future generations? What aspect of your life as a political activist? You've been jailed on a number of occasions, including during the emergency. You've struggled. You live a simple life. Many people say you're a mad person. Many people say you're trying to pose as if you're a messiah. People have accused you, called you all kinds of names. You look back on your life. What is the most important lesson you've learned from life, and what would you like to leave behind for future generations?
Say that we should believe, my only thing is we should believe in people, because my entire political life from the very beginning to this point, it is based on my faith on the people. It is these people which has helped me to organize, which has helped me to survive also in that way. And you have seen in my room that there is no weapon nor any guard or anything like that. It is only believing in people that I live.
Your followers carry bows and arrows, not guns.
No, never. And that bows and arrows, we sometimes we have, and we fought. One side there's a gun firing, and it says bows and arrows. In the history or in the past, it is true that the guns prevailed over the bows and arrows. But in Dhanbad, it is totally the opposite. Here with guns had to retreat, and bows and arrows that prevailed. Because everything depends on the might of the people and faith in people. That is my biggest thing which I have learned.
The lesson
we have learned.
And this is the message you would like to leave behind for future
that you
generations.
you believe in people. They will not. But it's very surprising thing. So many conspiracies were made to kill me. See, and in that way, lot of people were also killed. But all those things, conspiracies somehow failed, and those things came also in papers. It was published in papers, and several times the administration, they offered me that you take guard and all that thing, because all other people who were even without becoming MLA, MP, etc., they are with all bodyguards and all. But here we are.
Among A.K. Roy's supporters who were brutally murdered was Gurudas Chatterjee, MLA from Nirsa on the outskirts of Dhanbad.
He was the elected MLA of Nirsa for the third time. Not only first, 90 he was elected, 95 was elected, and 2000 also he was elected, like that. So naturally he more effectively started, you see, that removing the mafias and a new situation to creating a new situation in the Nirsa area, you see. And so but it is true that we were in constant struggle with the mafias.
जो निरसा के पूर्व विधायक रहे वो उभर रहे थे, माफियाओं ने उनकी हत्या कर दी.
Father pioneered this fight and took it to the height at that time. From 90 to 2000 he was elected 3 times in the Bihar Assembly. And we took the battle to the streets, took the battle to the Vidhan Sabha and to Delhi also. So at that time in 2000, when my father won the election for the third time also, the mafias were frustrated and they felt that it's time, either we have to do something so that we can carry on the business here. Because if my father would have been alive, illegal mining in this region would have been less, very much less. So that's why it was since the business runs since few crores of rupees in just one thana if you take up. So since it was a huge loss for the police, Jharkhand police, it was a huge loss for the illegal miners, means the mafias, coal mafias, huge loss for the some of the local politicians also. They all ganged up and killed my father on 14th April 2000 when he was coming in a motorcycle from Dhanbad. So still after his death also, still continuing the fight against the coal mafias and will continue it forever till our death.